We all know what the Orlando Magic's biggest need is. It almost doesn't even need to be said. So let's spend 30 minutes talking about how the Magic are going to fill it and how the Magic are going to find some shooting. It's time for Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is May 10th, 2023. My name is Philip Rossman-Ike. I'm the expert and site editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to talk about shooting. The Orlando Magic's problem with shooting, how they solve it, and where they might turn in free agency to get it done. We're going to talk about all the options ahead coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's podcast is brought to you by the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. At the end of the day, we all know the biggest thing holding this Magic team back. Yeah, they finished 16th in defensive rating for the season, 6th after December 7th, but their net rating, even after December 7th, was still hovering around 0. So even with one of the best defenses in the league, the Magic struggled to score. And it was a repeated issue we saw come up again and 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 again. How are the Magic going to generate points? And obviously, for the past decade, where the Magic have finished in the bottom 10 of the league in offensive rating for each of the last 10 years, finding shooting has been a challenge. For as much as the Orlando Magic revolutionized shooting in this league in the late aughts, they have been unable to take that next step, to take that step up and be part of the current wave of three-point shooting revolution that's going on. Whether that was because of bad drafting choices, poor development, the wrong players being available at the places where the Magic were picking, poor roster construction, poor free agent choices, shooting just hasn't been at a premium. Even under Jeff Weltman, the Magic have been unable to find the kind of knockdown shooters, even discovering them as diamonds in the rough, to help support this team and help them grow offensively. Well, now that the Magic are squarely focused on the playoffs, now that the Magic do have a centerpiece player in Paolo Banchero and Wendell Carter, finding shooting is only becoming a bigger deal. And for sure, this offseason, shooting seems to be the highest priority. At least among fans who are kind of tired of seeing the same old thing. We all want to see this team focus their offseason on shooting. If a guy can't shoot, frankly, I don't know if I want him on the team. Or added to the team, at least. That, of course, is completely unfair because I am a subscriber in the draft that you do take the best player available. You think about team fit, that matters, but talent is talent, and you find ways to make talent work, and you develop talent. Again, I think a lot of the failures of the Magic during this rebuild are more about player development issues than about are more about player development issues than they are necessarily about drafting the wrong player or whatnot. Certainly, yeah, we're gonna move forward. And the way to move forward is to start by thinking with what you have. As much as we want to add shooting to this roster, a lot of the Magic shooting improvements gonna start internally. And so while I advertise this as a free agency podcast, this is actually a player development podcast. Everything for this team starts with how they're able to develop their players. And there are at least some signs that the Magic could potentially develop some shooters of their own. But first, let's start with the big numbers. The Magic this year were 24th in the league in three-point field goal percentage at 34.6%. They were 27th in attempts at 31.1 three-point attempts per game, and thus 25th in three-point makes at 10.8 per game. We'll talk about this in the next segment, but one of the issues the Magic have is simply one of math. It's simply about volume. We talked about it on several occasions this year where the Magic gave up a lot of three-pointers. They did. That's part of their defensive strategy at the moment. And thus, they gave up a lot of makes at times. And teams torched them because the Magic couldn't always keep up. The Magic weren't going to hit 23s in a game. If they got to 15, that was a solid number. The Magic, in a lot of ways, were trying to limit how much their three-point deficit was. And again, that shows you why shooting threes right now is so important. And so what do the Magic have on the roster? As far as shooters go, Gary Harris is really the only reliable three-point shooter. He shot 43.1% on 4.5 attempts per game. By far the best shooter on the team. And, you know, with all due respect to my one commenter who thinks Gary Harris is overpaid and shouldn't be playing, you're wrong. If anything, the Magic need to do a better job getting Gary Harris more shots. That may not be his game, so that might be asking too much. We're going to get into that part of the conversation coming up in a moment. But Harris was the lone really good shooter on this team. Franz Wagner shot 36.1%. Cole Anthony shot 36.4%. Very, very respectable. And of course, Cole Anthony had a really strong closing kick to the season. Anthony played really, really well. Jalen Suggs shot 32.7% for the season, but 36% in the 19 games after the All-Star break. We all know the struggles that Paolo had from beyond the arc. So there's this weird thing with this team. You know, Wendell Carter, not afraid to shoot from three now, but not a good three-point shooter yet. Franz Wagner is developing into a very good three-point shooter. And as he adds that to his game, that's going to make him a lot better and a lot more effective. Jalen Suggs continues to improve as a three-point shooter. Cole Anthony shot 40+% after the All-Star break as well. So the Magic, and again, I'll give credit to Markelle Fultz. Not a good three-point shooter yet. Teams are happy to let him shoot, but he's not afraid to take those shots. And that's at least something. What I'm trying to say here is, if the Magic are going to make a leap offensively, it's still going to start with what they have on the team already. The Magic cannot rely solely on, they can't rely solely on bringing new players in. It's still going to take internal development to get their shooting where they want it to be. And there are guys that you trust to shoot. Honestly, I think a lot of the Magic's three-point shooting problems. And again, I give them credit. They knew they weren't a three-point shooting team. They didn't take a ton of threes. And I do think that is a credit to their coaching. They never, they knew that they lost games when they took too many threes, when they settled for three-pointers. Getting to the line is a big part of this team's identity, and I think it should remain that way. But the Magic still need these guys to get better at shooting. And again, some of that's just going to be about development. It's going to be about Paolo Banchero knowing when to make the pass, getting on-time, on-target passes. Gary Harris shot 4.5 threes. I'd like to see him up at 5 or 6 per game. Even if he's making one more three, shooting 1.5 for 4. Even if he makes one more three and it's 2 to 3 threes in 6 or 7 attempts, that's a huge difference. Because that also means the ball is moving, because he's not creating shots for himself necessarily. And we'll get to some of those guys again in a moment. the Magic need to find a way to increase their volume, and a lot of that's just going to be about the team becoming smarter about when they pass, where they pass, and how they pass. That's the truth of it here. But it's obviously not easy, and it's going to take some work, and it's going to take some effort from the players on the team, and very realistically, some of these guys aren't going to make it. I'm confident Jalen Suggs can be a 33, 34, maybe even a 35% three-point shooter over a season. I think injuries have really slowed him down. Getting a healthy offseason now to work on his game, he can shoot the ball. If he can get consistent, he can shoot the ball, and he can be a dangerous weapon. But clearly, this Magic team's going to need a little bit more. They're not going to be able to just rest on their laurels. They're not going to be able to say, oh, we'll just get better. They need guys' defenses respect. And that's where the draft and free agency come in. We're going to talk about the Magic's options in the draft, which we've done a little bit, but we'll get into it a little bit more, as well as free agency coming up here in just a moment. But first, a quick word from our friends at Gametime. You know, we've all been in that situation where we find out, we decide on a whim we want to go to the game, or there's that concert coming to town. The last concert I went to, I didn't know it was in town until the week before, and I was freaking out because it was Jack White's a big deal. Hard Rock isn't the biggest venue. Getting tickets was a bit of a concern, but you can always find tickets because you have Gametime in your corner. Gametime is the place to go for last-minute ticket deals and the best prices anywhere. It's the fastest-growing ticket app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email to find those tickets at the gate. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off, and download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So, obviously, a lot of our attention, when we've talked about the draft, and I have a daily spin for us coming up later on, get back to our daily spins, get back to talking about the playoffs after taking yesterday off on that. A lot of our attention on drafts come down to shooting. I am openly saying this, and who knows if this is what the Magic's goal is, but my goal for draft night, my number one thing I want to see on draft night is I want to see the Magic get a shooter. Above everything else, the Magic need a shooter. I don't care if it's by trade, and I'm not going to get into trades because trades are so hypothetical and not always obvious, especially on draft night. So the Magic could, I'm going to say a lot of things. The Magic could make a trade that makes all of it moot, especially when it comes to draft. So I'll put that warning out there. But whether it's drafting a guy or whether it's trading for a guy, I believe the Magic need to come away on June 22nd, June 23rd with a shooter. They need to come away with a shooter on those days, on that day. And if they do that, it will be a successful draft. Fortunately for the Magic, this is a draft that does have some shooting options. We've done mock drafts, and Grady Dick has been the guy that a lot of people have focused on, a very popular pick among Magic fans. Averaged 14.1 points per game, hit 40.3% of his three-pointers on 5.7 attempts per game, made 85.4% of his free throws. And if you're new to this, I always, with shooters especially, always point out their free throw percentage. Free throw percentage is a better predictor of NBA three-point success than the college three-point line. So I will note that. I will note that where I can. But Grady Dick is probably the best pure shooter in this draft. Great form. Seems to just have an effortless shot. Has no hiccups, no bad history with the shot either. It feels like he is the best shooter in the draft. If the Magic are going to take him, they're going to have to take him 6th. He's not going to last to 11. But the other option the Magic have at 6 is Taylor Hendricks from UCF. He is, I don't have his numbers in front of me, but he is a really good shooter, especially for a player his size. He's 6'9", 6'10". Pretty solid shooter. Not going to shoot off the move. Much more of a set shooter. Line driver. He's very, very talented. Good body for the NBA. So, good defender as well. So he adds that. Grady Dick's definitely a specialist. But the other guy I'm watching is UConn's Jordan Hawkins. I've been very high on Jordan Hawkins for a while now. Averaged 16.2 points per game. Shot 38.8% from deep. You'll notice that is a little bit worse than Dick's 40.3%, but still solid. On 7.6 attempts, so a little bit higher volume in college with an 88.7% free throw percentage. To me, that tells you a little bit that Hawkins is someone that can translate. Hendricks, I do have it in front of me now, 39.4% from deep. You also got Baylor's Keontae George, 33.8% on a high volume as well. Michigan's Jet Howard, also an option with 36.8% shooting. The point is, if the Magic want to draft a shooter, there are shooters available. And they're pretty good shooters, and shooters that you should feel comfortable taking. If the Magic come away with Dick, Howard, Hendricks, or George, they've probably done a good job. Keontae George certainly has fallen off. He really struggled toward the end of the season, especially struggled in big games for Baylor. Had to create a lot. Cam Whitmore has some of the same issues. Cam Whitmore was not a good three-point shooter. I'm more skeptical of his three-point shooting because he shot like 70% from the line last year. People will tell you like, no. Cam Whitmore, best spot-up shooter one of the best spot-up shooters in the nation. Just didn't get the opportunity because he had to be on the ball a lot. That context matters. I'm not here to dispute those stats, but the free throw percentage makes me a little bit worried about his translation to the NBA. Again, really good driver, can do multiple things. You need guys that aren't just going to be shooters sometimes. So you do need shooting to that point. The good news for the Magic, too, is there are quite a few free agent options for shooting. The big point that I've been making, and I think this is the thing that the Magic need to find, is they need a volume shooter. Terrence Ross was on the low end of this. He always shot like 33%, but he'd take like 8 threes per game. So if he's shooting 33%, taking 8 threes, he's still making 3 threes a game. And that's the kind of thing. And then sometimes that 3 would be 5. Sometimes it'd be 1 for 8. And obviously those games were the problem. But that's something the Magic are missing. Gary Harris took 4 3-pointers per game. I would argue they need to either find a way to get him to take more or find someone that's going to take more threes. And again, maybe that's Cole Anthony. Maybe Cole Anthony becomes a little mini Fred VanVleet, where he's able to hit some pull-up threes, kind of get guys off the dribble, make threes. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways this could go, and the Magic might know by the time July comes around what they have on the roster and where guys are developed. Volume shooting to me is a big deal. And there are quite a few volume shooters. Fred VanVleet's obviously the big one out there. The Magic are probably operating with around $25 million in cap room. They can get up north of 30, which would put them in range to sign Fred VanVleet. If they start cutting a lot of guys like Gary Harris, Jonathan Isaac, they let Mo Wagner go, they cut Michael Carter-Williams. Gary Harris and Jonathan Isaac are the two key guys. If they cut Gary Harris, they're fishing for big fish, and really Fred VanVleet, maybe Chris Middleton, are the two big fish that they could go after in this free agency. They're not going after Kyrie Irving. If they do, I don't even want to think about that. But Fred VanVleet last year, a little bit of a down year, 19.3 points per game, 34.2% from deep, but 8.8 attempts per game. That's actually down from last year, but he's averaged more than 5 3-point attempts per game in each of the last 4 years. This is a guy that is going to take threes. Gary Trent Jr. is kind of the same deal. Averaged 17.4 points per game, shot 36.9% from beyond the arc, 6.8 attempts per game, down from 7.8 per game last year. So again, Trent has a reputation for being a little bit streaky, but this is the main point I'm trying to make. They take the threes. They get open, and certainly Toronto's ecosystem gives them some open shots, but they take contested threes. They make contested threes, and they constantly have pressure on the defense because they're always a threat to shoot. This is what the Magic are missing. The Magic do not have a player like this that's going to take 5-6 threes a game and make them at a decent clip. Trent's likely going to demand a pretty high salary. I would expect that he'll get in the 15, 16, 17, maybe even into the $20 million range. If the Magic go after Gary Trent Jr., that's their summer. That's their big signing. They'll maybe add a few guys. They obviously have the draft to supplement the roster, but they'll add a few guys with mid-level exception perhaps, or the apron exception, or the room exception. But that's their big move. The other guys to watch out are the Miami Heat's duo shooters, Max Strus and Gabe Vincent. Both are coming off of kind of minimum deals after they were discovered by the Miami Heat. Both are excellent shooters. Strus shot 35% from deep on 7 3-point attempts per game to get to 11.5 points per game. Vincent scored 9.4 points per game on 33.4% shooting on 5.1 attempts per game. Again, with these guys, their volume is the point. They are role players. They're only there to shoot threes, essentially. And Strus is a smart player. Vincent is a smart player. But they're there to shoot threes. And they shoot a lot of them. So this is the direction the Magic can go. And the question I think, and this is the difficult and maybe impossible question to answer, and why, you're always buyer beware when you do free agency. Do those players work because they're in the ecosystems of Toronto and Miami? Miami and Toronto are two of the best offenses in the league. They know they're very veteran teams. They know who they are. Those guys get their shots because of the way that they run their system. Does that work with the Magic? A team that doesn't really have a set offensive system, has a lot of young guys that are learning how to play better and play together. I think those are fair questions and ones that are tough to answer, but those are just 4 options that are out there. 2 other guys that are worth mentioning, and that's kind of in the 3-and-D mold. And these guys may not necessarily be 3-and-D players, but these guys are not volume 3-point shooters, but still good shooters that'll help space the floor and give the Magic a little bit of something. I've been on the Bruce Brown train for the last 2 years. For really the last 2 years. He had a good season in Brooklyn last year, signed with the Denver Nuggets, 2-year deal, player option on the second year. Could be in line to get a little bit of a pay bump and get a little bit more long-term security. I really like Bruce Brown. He's a great defender. He's been running some point for Denver in this playoff series. Hasn't had big games, but he makes big plays. Signed a 2-year, $13.3 million deal, player option for next year, so could get a pay bump. Average 11.5 points per game. 35.8% shooting from 3.2 attempts per game. Again, Denver, not a high-volume 3-point shooting team. They don't take a ton of threes. And Brown, his 3-point shooting goes up and down. He's only shooting, entering last night's game, only shooting 21.1% from deep in the playoffs. So something to consider there. But he's had good shooting years. He shot 40% with Brooklyn 2 years ago, generally in the mid-30s 3-point shooting percentage. So he's a guy that can give you a little bit of defense, can be a little bit of a playmaker on the ball as well as hit an open 3 when given the opportunity. Maybe not someone that is quite a 3-point specialist. The other guy, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about him on bigger free agent lists. I think the Magic are going to be in the running for Austin Reeves. I know some Magic fans are a little bit skeptical about him. A lot of people think that he's just getting the Lakers bump. He's on TV a lot. He's on the Lakers. Makes him feel like he's a bigger deal. The Lakers surely have learned their lesson from letting Alex Caruso go. So perhaps they will pony up and pay him. They are limited in what they can match on him because he's on such a small contract. And so I do think Reeves is kind of ripe for the taking. And honestly, the more I watch Reeves, the more I think what he does is real. He is a very crafty playmaker. He is good at drawing fouls, and maybe he is getting the benefit of a Lakers whistle if such a thing exists. But he is very good at getting fouls. He is very good at scoring in the in-between game, and he'll hit an open 3 if he's given an open 3. Reeves for the season, 14.4 points per game, 34.6% shooting on 5.2 attempts. Again, not great volume. His volume increase that's in the playoffs actually. Sorry, in the regular season, 13 points per game, 61.6% effective field goal percentage, 39.8% on 3.4 attempts per game. His volume's gone up in the playoffs to 5.2 attempts per game. His efficiency's gone down. But this is a guy that can shoot. You give him an open shot, he's going to shoot. He's going to know how to attack closeouts. I think Reeves is a really smart player. And so I'm a believer. I think that he is a good player. I think he's a great role player. I think he would help a team like the Magic, especially kind of fitting what the Magic want to do. They want everyone to be able to make plays, to play on the ball, to make decisions with the ball. I think Brown is good at this too, but Reeves is really good at making his decisions. And again, he's a shooter. He's someone that defenses are going to respect. They're going to respect his drive. They're going to respect his shot, and that's a really good player. That's why Reeves is able to have such big games. Again, there are a lot of options. I could go through some of the gunner options that I looked at as well. I don't think they're real. Kelly Oubre Jr., I think, is someone the Magic could go to if they strike out on a couple guys. He can shoot it a little bit. He could shoot it for sure, but he will take a lot of shots to get his points. That would not be my first option, but I do think that is on the table as well. But again, this Magic team needs shooting. Plain and simple. This Magic team needs shooting, and finding it is going to be the biggest challenge of the offseason. There are options, though, and I think that is the most important part. We'll do our daily lottery spin, get back to that, talk a little bit about the playoffs from the last couple nights. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. So the NBA playoffs march on. We're through games 5 now. I think all our series are past game 5. Yeah, all our we got. We're doing games. We're in the midpoint of our game 5s here. Sorry, I'm losing track of time. And the biggest thing that I've seen over the last couple days is really about decision making. If you've listened to my podcast enough, if you listen to me yammer on like I do, you've heard me say all the time, good teams don't win close games, they avoid them. That's true in the regular season. In the playoffs, you better be able to win close games. The reason why the Miami Heat are 1 win away from the Eastern Conference Finals yet again is they don't lose close games. All their guys make really good decisions, they play really calm, and they make big shots. And over again over the last 2 days, we saw teams, even some really experienced veteran teams, make bad choices. And so yes, end of game situations matter. Being able to make good choices, being able to keep your calm, keep your cool is such a big deal. I want to give 2 examples. One is an obvious one that's been talked a lot on talk radio and sports talk radio. And, I'll give my 2 cents here. I thought Joe Mazzulla made the right call not calling timeout. I generally like, especially with that much time. If you have less time, if you have like 10 seconds left, call timeout, advance the ball. Don't waste your time advancing the ball there. But with 20 seconds left, don't call. I don't think you need to call timeout. You should, at this stage of the season, you should have trust in your team to be able to run their stuff and get a good shot. The Celtics did not reward that trust. And they didn't reward that trust in 2 ways. And it's just no time and score. On the James Harden 3 in overtime, that was a complete breakdown by Jaylen Brown and the Boston Celtics. And no one's really talked about this. Joel Embiid, the Celtics did a great job doubling Joel Embiid throughout Game 4. I was really impressed with Boston's defense on Joel Embiid to get back in that game, give themselves a chance to win it. But up by 2 with 30 seconds to go, they needed to call off that double. The only thing that hurts you in that situation is a 3-pointer. And Philadelphia did a really good job isolating Joel Embiid where there was only one option to help and double him. And it was off of James Harden in the corner for a 3. Difficult shot, but, Embiid was able to get deep enough, pull Jaylen Brown far enough, and kick it to James Harden for what was essentially an open 3. You got to know in that situation time and score. You got to know a 3 is the only thing that beats you. And the Celtics allowed them to get beat by 3. But you're down by 1. You still got 20 seconds left. There's literature and there's analytics that will tell you it's better to have the ball in your hands. And I did not hate that Joe Mazzulla didn't call timeout. I hated how slow Boston brought the ball up the floor. I hated how long it took Boston to get into their set. And they did the same thing at the end of regulation, where they waited until there was like 5 or 6 seconds left instead of 7 or 8 seconds left to get into their offense and try and win the game. They were too slow, too lacking energy to get into their stuff. And that lack of energy played out again in Game 5 when Philadelphia just ran them off the court. That part of that is coaching. When Mazzulla saw them running so slowly into their offense, that might have been when you call the timeout, just to say like, hey, we got to pick it up. We're down 1 here, guys. Make sure we get a good shot. And look, Boston did get a good shot. They just got it too late. I'm a big believer. I hate winding down the clock at the end of those games, especially when you're down 1. Just get the basket. I would have ran regular offense. I don't care how much time I leave Philadelphia. I trust my defense to get a stop. And put the ball in Philadelphia's court. But I did not like the way that they played that. That was my only criticism. Again, just bad decision. Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart took too long to get into their offense. It cost them that game. A second earlier, Marcus Smart hits that 3. Boston's up 3-1, heading back to Boston. Sure, they maybe lose Game 5 still because Boston's weird. But again, you have that cushion. Same thing kind of happened in the Lakers-Warriors game on Monday night. I really dislike the shot selection from Golden State. The series has been all about the paint and winning the paint. And, when the Lakers are able to win the paint with Anthony Davis, the Warriors are really struggling to find themselves. And they're down by 3 at one point. And I think Draymond Green had a wide open layup that he didn't take with time on the clock. Stretching the game is important. Make the Lakers make free throws. You have Steph Curry. You will get chances to score again. And look, Steph Curry did all that he could. Him digging out that jump ball at the end of that game was so impressive. And there was just nowhere for him to go with the basketball. He had a timeout, and I don't think he realized it. Again, time and score. These guys forget time and score sometimes. But I thought Golden State's offensive execution down the stretch was just really bad. A couple turnovers. They tried the hammer screen, Darvin Ham, and the Lakers sniffed that out. The hammer screen is apparently named for Darvin Ham. I did not realize that. I thought it was just a pound the rock thing with the Spurs. But just the Warriors are a championship team, and they still executed really poorly down the stretch. Winning close games matters in the playoffs. That's my main point. Let's get back to doing our daily lottery spin. I'm behind on my daily lottery spins on OrlandoMagicDaily.com, on at OMagicDaily. In our spin today, Washington gets the first pick. Oklahoma City climbs up to number 2. Portland gets number 3. So Orlando drops 2 spots to 8, as well as picking 12th from the Bulls. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, about how the Magic might kind of game this a little bit. I would suspect Jordan Hawkins will be there at 12 or 11, although he might climb. I really like this kid's game the more I watch him. So a lot of people think that the Magic should take a big forward. They should take like Taylor Hendricks at 8. Very good chance that in this scenario, Hendricks is there at 8. I think Hendricks would be a good addition to this team. We did a whole podcast on how the Magic need a backup 4. I think he would fill that role really, really well, give this team some needed rim protection, as well as some interior defense and interior presence they don't really have yet. A good energy about him. And then you can come back and grab Jordan Hawkins. You can grab Bryce Sensabaugh even at 12, just make it a double local draft. So again, the thing I like about this draft is where the Magic are picking, I feel very comfortable with the guys that are going to be available to them and the options that they have. Outside of where the guys Magic are picking, if the Magic, fell too far or get out of the lottery, I don't like the options. I really think the talent in this draft drops off pretty heavily after the lottery. And so, again, some guys will prove you wrong. There's always someone out there that you don't expect. But my initial review is the Magic are in a good spot to get to players who are going to contribute, but the margin for error is a little bit thin on that. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. You, of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the places on the podcast to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic for my everyday squad, we're going to chat about the season as a whole with a special guest. I'm not going to tell you who it is. If you follow the Locked On Podcast Network, you could probably guess who's going to be on the show. Very excited to have this guest on and talk about the Magic from a Nationals perspective and what comes next for this team. It's going to be a very, very fun episode tomorrow, so definitely check it out. But until then, For Orlando Magic, Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.